Hi John, lovely
Hello.
to see you. Here we sit in front of one of your paintings for the exhibition, and which is called Food and Art. And I just would like to ask you a little bit about where does the subject come from, why are you interested in the dimensions of this art, of the artwork, and if you could just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to, yeah. I think the idea of making large-scale images of plates of food came a couple of years ago when I had the good fortune to do an artist residency in northern France, and I was invited to work in a fantastic large-scale gallery in a small town. It was an ex-mining town called Salamines, near the border in the north of France. Not only half an hour from Calais, that sort of area. And it's quite an interesting area. It's like a sort of post-industrial area. The particular town was quite poor, but it was quite interesting because it used to be coal mining there, and it used to be a massive coal mining industry in that area, but all that's gone now, and all that's left visually to see are these massive slag heaps all around the landscape. So when you're in the town, you look down the road, and right in the deep distance, you see this huge, almost like a sort of black pyramids, and they are visual. You know, you just jump in the car, you go anywhere, and suddenly you turn a corner, and the massive, absolutely huge, humongous slag heaps. But there's no sign of any mining going on anymore, and that's the only visual, unless you go to a museum, you know. So I was thinking about that area, and a book I read many years ago by Zola, and it's Germinal, I think.
Germinal, yeah.
And it's Germinal was I'm pretty sure it was set around that area, and it was a very sort of visceral story about people who lived and worked down the mines and basically struggled away, and it was like an absolutely awful existence for them in you know, say in Victorian times, that sort of era. So it's a great account of the struggle, the daily struggle of life for people, trying to just get by. And I was sort of thinking about, I had this opportunity to work in this beautiful gallery, and the work was going to be very temporary. You know, I just thought I wanted it to be have a great impact. I wasn't sure what to do at all. I had recently lost my mother, and I was sort of coming to terms with that as well. But the area, it was interesting because coming from Lancashire, Manchester and Lancashire, the sort of food that I ate, I noticed that that's what the locals around that area ate, and there was plenty of chip shops, you know, and in the supermarkets it was, you know, very sort of basic, lots of basic sort of food that we would eat, I would eat growing up, you know. It would be, so the sort of food I would eat, what my mother would put in front of me, it was obvious to me that these people, that's what they're, you know, it's pretty basic, hearty food if they were lucky, you know, to eat it. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about that, these incredible, awe-inspiring slag heaps, how they dominate everywhere. And I was thinking about what it must have been like to be, you know, somebody who had to struggle away, a family trying to just basically get by, you know, and what an awfully difficult life it would have been. And I was thinking probably the dominating theme would be, how do we survive, the next few weeks? How are we going to have enough money to just be able to put a plate of food on the table for ourselves and our children and all that? And that would have been the reason why they were working there, so they could scrape a living together and put a meal on the table. And so I thought about that, and I thought about how growing up, when I grew up in Manchester, my mum and dad worked in factories and things, and we didn't have an awful lot of money, but my mum and dad worked hard, and we were lucky and grateful for what we had. And I was thinking about that idea of being able to put a meal in front of your loved ones, after a hard day's work. It's just a basic meal that would satisfy your hunger, and you'd sleep well at night and all that. And so that's why I thought about making this massive plate of very basic food, chips, sausage, egg, things like that, which are fuel really, but really hearty and tasty. And so I thought, well, it's to somehow counteract, to say something about the importance of that. I would make it massive, so it would somehow relate to these massive slag heaps.
Yes.
So it's that relationship between the work, the toil and the grime and everything to do with that. So in the end, at the end of the day, you could go, yes, there it is. I've managed to sort that out. We're going to eat tonight. We're all right here. So that's why I made it massive.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it to have great impact, and also I just thought it's going to look incredible in this gallery. So you could walk through the entrance, and immediately you see it opposite you. And I wanted it to be the angle almost. That's why these are sort of the oval shaped. It's almost like if you were sat at a table, the idea is that it's the food is in front of you. It's at a slight angle going.
Yes,
So it's not right. It's not completely circular. It's more of an oval sort of shape. So that's why I've done these like that. And in this exhibition, Susan Lord saw the catalogue from the exhibition in France, and decided that she would make an exhibition about food and art, and asked me to respond to that. And I knew this gallery was absolutely stunning, so I jumped at the chance to do that. And so what I decided to do was make it so that it was, the first one was a full plate of food, the middle one was half eaten, and the final one is the finished plate of food. So the idea is that, because the exhibition in France I called Nothing Lasts Forever as well, and I was thinking about how relevant it was walking around that place where all this industry which would have been there, it's gone now, so it would have been an incredibly intense, dark place, full of action, full of, everything involved with that. And now it's all silent, and all that's left are these massive slag heaps. So and then I thought about a plate of food. How I was thinking about this idea of when you're making a plate of food for your loved one, what you do is each component of the food, the potato, the carrots, the egg, you try and cook them to the best of your ability, and without even really thinking about it, you arrange them on a plate. So you arrange these different elements on the plate, and you try and make them without even probably realising you're making a work of art, really.
Yes.
Because it's the visual impact of putting food on a plate, all the different components of it. And that it can look absolutely stunningly beautiful, actually. And so that's what I was thinking about making when I was decided to make a huge artwork of,
Yeah.
you know, so in a way what it's doing is it's glorifying the mundane and everyday, and sort of, so yes, it doesn't last forever, the meal doesn't last forever, but the idea behind it is that, you know, my mother made me a meal which was pretty basically similar to a meal that I would make my daughters. You know, I would come in from work after a hard day's work. I have 3 hungry daughters there who would want their food, and yeah, it was my turn to cook. So I'd roll my sleeves up, look in the fridge, see what was in the fridge. You know, sometimes it's just you just make do with whatever there is there. You know, either you've not got the money or you just haven't time to go to the shops. So actually you think, actually that's okay. So it's a bit of a mishmash sometimes, what you put on the plate, but you just do what you can do, you know. And probably majority of meals are like that for most people. It's what's in the fridge and what you can cobble together sometimes, you know.
Yes.
You know, and you just do your best with it.
Yeah.
You know, and usually everybody is very happy about that. You know, they're hungry, they sit down, a plate of food is put in front of them. Yeah, sausage and chips, let's have it. You know, and extreme happiness.
Yes.
At that moment in time, you know, and extremely grateful, and the love is there, you know. And I was thinking about, nothing lasts forever, but does love last forever in a way? You know, because, you know, my mum did that for us. You know, they did it because they loved us. You know, they wanted to put a nice plate of food in front of us, and we really loved it. And then I did that for my children, you know, and so has that always been the case, you know? So, okay, nothing lasts forever, but maybe one thing does. Maybe love lasts forever.
Yes.
Maybe love is eternal, and it just keeps going on and on.
I think that's absolutely stunning, you know, the way you pulled all these different things together. And what I found really striking is when you painted, you know, in words, this landscape where you came and you said there's slack heaps and this, you know, which are these kind of dark reminders of a very dark history. But then you said, on the other hand, they are just there. So they tell this history, but they don't, it's not indicated, so to speak. So they say something, and at the same time, they are very silent, you know, they are these silent reminders. And I can really imagine you kind of, with your painter's eye, going there and seeing these huge dimensions, and that, you know, then the big plate starts with this idea of dimension, of this, you know, I have to make that big.
Yes, the impact, you know, they have an impact on you visually, and you think, what the hell is that? And when you realise that they are actually slag heaps, and the scaling, you realise what an unbelievable industry, and how many. Because at that time, it was all by hand, wasn't it? You know, they didn't have fantastic machines to, you know, it was all hand picks and, you know, and shovels and people pushing wagons and, you know, so.
And then, you know, this relationship to, you know, the exhibition where you says nothing lasts forever. And, you know, obviously that makes a lot of sense with food and you know, in a very literal way, you have your plate of food, you eat it, it's gone. But obviously it does something to us, and it does something to us on a nutritional value. But also, as you said, this idea of love, you know, that every plate of food, even if it's just a microwaved pizza or something like that, has an element of love and care. And I think these slack heaps and what the generations before us have done, and particularly the working class, and there's obviously also for you the relationship to where you were in France and where you come from in Lancashire. So these, you know, this history, these dark history, but this industrialization, but at the same time, it's gone. Nothing lasts forever. It's all gone, but it's in us. You know, it fuels the history of the area. It fuels the history of Manchester and Greater Manchester, and the people who we are. And I think the other thing that I found very striking is how you connected the idea of family and, you know, your parents and the love you got from your parents and how you are handing this on. And I think this is also the case in this kind of history, you know, the reminders and what is left, you know, that this kind of memory. And maybe this is also a memory, and we have a duty to have this memory and not to forget, in the same way as you mustn't forget the love you have been fed and you're handing it on to your daughters, and that is a kind of legacy. So I think it's quite fascinating how the subject of food pulls together the personal and the kind of political and public history. Yeah,
it's true. The other thing was what I found out that area, it's, you'd be aware of France. There's a lot of agricultural land, you know, and the towns usually they're quite compact. They're surrounded by the countryside, huge, you know, very quite vast fields in every direction. And I was asking some of the people there, what's the main employer now? You know, because it was quite the town. It's quite down at heel, really. Apparently, it was one of the I think it was the second poorest village in France at the time. And I said, who's the big employer then here? And they said McCain's, which and because it's like chips, because the main crop was potatoes, you know, in that area, you know. So there's a very good chance that these chips that I've cooked here were from there, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because food also has this history of, on the one hand, being very local and very specific. As you said, the food you have been brought up with. Yeah. There's, you know, chips and eggs and beans and sausages, yes. But on the other hand, when we look at it now, it could be from anywhere. So it has this local history, but it also has this global dimension to it, where you know, it could be from anywhere, and it can be also in that respect something that pulls us as, you know, as humans all together. I think isn't that the one we have all in common as humans? We all eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all have these stories about food.
It's what we are, isn't it? You know.
Yes.
If we don't eat, we don't exist, do we? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting that, you know, when I just came in a bit earlier and I just looked at it, and it really wows you. And I think, and I wondered if you wanted to say something about the, you know, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, the ordinariness of that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, how the dimension, you know, the relationship between the ordinary aspect of the food, but the dimension, how that works.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, isn't it? Scale and dimension is really interesting. Because I've done some smaller cutout. These are cutout. I call them cutout paintings, really, and pieces of MDF board. That's two large pieces of MDF board screwed together with a frame at the back, so they look like they're slightly off the wall. But I've done some smaller ones that I can carry around, and I go into the countryside, or I go into the city, and I might take a fried egg or something or other into and photograph it in front of buildings and interesting landscapes. And there's something really quite very interesting about doing that, because I find that, you know, depending on the location, you know, what happens is that there's this cutout painting exhibited, you know, wherever it is, outside somewhere, and when that happens, you start questioning you start thinking about the landscape, and then you start thinking about the painting as well, and the two different subject matters and why they are, you know, what the relationship is with them, you know, and it's somehow it's an intriguing thing, and I like that. You know.
And I've seen some of the pictures, and they're really striking, because you see suddenly somewhere this you're traveling around with a fried egg, and you suddenly it's on the one hand, you know, it's very mundane, the fried egg, but also having it in this different surrounding, and again the dimensions of it, you know, and just because it's so incongruous, it just makes you think about it. It makes you think about the relationship of food and its various environments, and what it means to us. And for me, it was also something which is really interesting. You know, as you know, I really like cooking, and I like kind of trying out things, and I've asked Milo, my 14-year-old, I asked him, what is the most memorable meal you ever had? And he said, really spontaneously and directly, he said, about a few years ago, we visited somebody and they made me scrambled egg, and that was the best meal I ever had.
Wow.
Which was only very disappointing for me. And, you know, it's something which is, you know, something that was so, really surprised me, but I thought also how lovely. There is somebody, he can't remember the people. I remember then who they were and what it was, and it was a lovely weekend we spent with friends, and I thought, he doesn't remember anything, but what he remembers is that scrambled egg. And I'm sure, and that weekend was also a weekend where he met another young boy, and they got on really well, and they had the most magic weekend. But it was all condensed in that scrambled egg.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
So I thought this is, and I couldn't be kind of, you know, cross with it, you know, that he didn't choose one of my meals. But I thought it's lovely to see that, you know, how a memory is established in a very simple food and in a simple moment of eating. And you know, how it actually so many other things are part of it. And I think when I look at that, and I like the idea that you actually show the whole process of the food, you know, that, you know, that the plate is full, and then it slowly empties, and then at the end we have the empty food, the empty plate.
Empty plate,
And you think something that was there is gone, but then you also think, but where is it now? Where has that food, you know, when I kind of walked around here, I was like, okay, so where is it now? But isn't that weird with food? Because I think it is gone, but it must have gone somewhere. So, and I think it is in us, you know, and it makes us talk, and it makes us, you know, who we are in a cultural as well as in a purely bodily way, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking, you know, when I made the work in France, I knew it was only going to be a temporary artwork. It was only temporary. So at the end, it was just scraped off the wall, and we kept a few bin bags of it, and it's been sort of recycled a bit here and there into different pieces of work from time to time.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
We've done that a bit. You know, and these three paintings have been made specifically for Bury Art Gallery, but only they're temporary. You know, so to physically take them off the wall, we have to destroy them. There's only one way of getting them off the wall, and it's actually to unscrew them into bits and tear them up and actually destroy these works, so that I'll be able to, because they're board, and I'll be able to recycle the board, use it again into something else. You know, that's great. You know, and that's okay. And for me, you know, I'm not precious in that way that these, you know, it's important that they have to last forever. You know, they're not going to last forever at all, you know, and it's a thing where I think you know, I'm nearly 60, and I think the amount of work that I've made in the past, and in the end, it's just sat in wherever it's sat, you know. Yeah, you've got something like
you've got something in our place, in our cellar, yes.
I've got to get them.
Yeah, well, you know, it's quite happy there at the moment.
But it is that way where you think, well, they're huge as well. I mean, they're not really for houses, these. You know, these are for being seen, and then they're done.
For public space, and for,
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting that you refer to that, because I do think it does have something to do with age to a certain extent, this idea of, you know, when you get older, you also realize I'm not going to be I'm not going to be here forever, you know, I'm not going to last forever, you know.
No.
And I think maybe, but so there is this kind of slight thinking about mortality, but at the same time it also enhances that sense of, you know, the presence of something, you know, because these are so immediate and so present when you stand in front of them. And so I think that's a really interesting relationship, how this, you know, aging and getting older and having experiences is also allowing you to let go of certain things, and makes you, does it make you think different about art and what it means to you?
It makes me think different, feel different about everything, really. No, not just art. You know, I was sort of thinking slightly differently, but I was thinking about how I've got old motorbikes, right, and I've sort of treasured these old motorbikes for decades, you know, and I love them and everything. But I'm sort of look at them and think, actually, I don't ride them, I just keep them, you know, I just keep these things. And I've got a piece of work in mind, and it's of one of my old motorbikes, and it's the carburettors of the motorbike. And I was thinking about this idea of these two carburettors when, in motorcycle language, you know, if you've got a vehicle that has got one carburettor, then people who maybe have got two carburettors have got something to brag about, you know. Okay. So when you're explaining your motorcycle, you say, oh, yeah, it's the twin carb model, the twin carb, you know, like that. And I was sort of thinking about this idea of them being called carbs, and how these are carbs,
yes,
you
obviously,
know, and all that. And I was thinking about this thing of really overall, you know, and I'm clinging onto these things, and I'm clinging onto a sort of romantic thing of it, know. So I've got these incredible, I've took these incredible things, the little carburettors, which are really intricate, incredibly well engineered things, you know, that are intrinsic to this motorcycle running, really. And what I did, I've sort of taken them to pieces, so they're apart. So there's one carburettor and there's another, and they're absolutely useless when they're not joined together. And I was thinking it'd be interesting to make a really great big couple of cutout paintings of these carburettors, you know.
The disassembled one?
Disassembled, you know, so there's the two, you know, and they're separated. And take them into a beautiful landscape and photograph them, these paintings, massive paintings. So it's playing around with scale again, and this idea of thinking about, well, it's the word carb, and how it, it's quite an emotive word, isn't it? Carbon and stuff like that, and I was thinking about if I take them in the landscape and put them there, and you think about trees and anything that grows basically creates carbon, doesn't it? And we create carbon.
But it also gets you back to your slack heaps.
Coal. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So it's the idea of the fossil fuel and stuff. So it's quite, and I was sort of looking at these, really admiring the engineering in them, but thinking, they're going to be they're useless now because they're just sat in my garage.
Yes. I think we have items like this in our garage as well.
Blokes of a certain age.
I know, right. But I think this is also very similar to what you said, about this. There you are. They look absolutely beautiful, and then you disassemble them, and then it's something different or it's gone. And I think when you have a plate of food, obviously that's very similar. You said a little bit before. You arrange your food, and you either you use kind of colors, but also shapes and textures. So you kind of put it on differently, and then obviously with every meal you destroy that piece of art that you've created. So you kind of go through this process every day. You arrange something, and obviously sometimes more. When you just have your muesli in the morning. That's one thing, but if you have people around for dinner and you also have a lovely dinner table, and you put your candles on, and at the end you have stains on your tablecloth and some red wine spilled, and so everything that was pristine, but you don't want it to be pristine at the end of the table, at the end of the evening. It's actually having dishes and having the stains and having this, in a way, destruction of what you've created is also a sense of appreciation. And I think that, is really shown in this cycle that the full plate and the empty plate.
Well, actually, this needs to go further on. I've got another couple of days to work on this, but it's actually quite interesting, I think, from a painter's point of view, the halfway through meal. Because the egg gets splodged about a bit, and bits of things get smeared. So from a painter's point of view, it's more interesting in a way, because you can paint with smudgy colours and all that, the textures and things. So the halfway through meal is probably as interesting, or maybe more interesting than when the meal is brand new and sat in front of you.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because now we live in this culture, in this very visual culture, and with social media, and when we go somewhere out and have a meal. And I mean, I do it myself when I make a nice cake and I take a picture of it. Obviously 20, 30 years ago, nobody did that. No. You didn't do it. Nobody photographed food. And now we are surrounded by it. And when it is posted, it is also kind of, tells a story. I'm out tonight and I'm eating this. And I think that also has influenced the presentation of food, because knowing that people will photograph it, so there will be more effort that's put into presentation.
Yes, it is. Right,
So I like this, what you say, that for you it's the messiness of it, and
exciting for an artist. That.
Yes. But I also think it's at the beginning of our personal journey with food, because when we start eating, either if we bottle fed or breastfed, but that first, I'm sure you remember it with your girls, that the first meal you give them is a total mess, but it's also an incredible joy. It's
this, to see them eating something,
suddenly seeing this kind of baby that, first time, and also the way children or these small babies eat when they eat, and you really see how they you put something in their mouth, and they suddenly, it is as if they want to know what it is, and it's all new to them. And,
that's interesting.
And you see in their face, it's like they're trying to understand it. So that again, there is this food as nutrition, but also food as knowing the world and taking steps into the world and into culture and in our social surroundings.
Yeah.
So I think that messiness is also, in that respect, really interesting.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
That you're going through that process.